Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Aaron, for using your voice to elevate our service into holiness, and Rabbi Werber for your leadership and warmth tonight, Joyce for holding down the fort, and Yolanda, thank you for all your years of service at CBST. Really appreciate it. Judah, Reuben, Simeon, is anyone there? Can anyone help me? Joseph shouts into the void. Hunger pangs his stomach, and thirst scratches his throat. The sun hasn't reached Joseph for over an hour, though he can still see it setting as he looks up at his brothers enjoying supper. He cannot make out their words, and he realizes they're going to ignore his pleas. The uncertainty of nightfall fills the space. Joseph lies at the bottom of the pit, alone and terrified. This moment when Joseph's brothers betray him will stay imprinted upon his heart. How can one heal from such a deep wound? 13 years later, Joseph finds himself in a much different position. Egypt experiences a time of abundance while Canaan endures famine. The sons of Israel approach Egypt's prime vizier, begging for salvation. And unbeknownst to them, the power broker who can choose between their life and their death is none other than the brother they deserted so many years ago. Joseph possesses the means to exact his revenge. He carries the authority to harm his brothers, and it appears Joseph wants to act on this impulse. As Rabbi Werber said, he wants to twist the knife. After a ruse to accuse them of a crime, he orders the brothers to bring him Benjamin, the new, youngest, most beloved son of Jacob, making him into a slave. Judah, who plotted the incident at the pit, now begs for mercy. Please let me, your servant, remain in place of the boy. Finally, these brothers are going to feel what Joseph felt so many years ago, the pain and the trembling of the past. Retribution lies in his reach. Suddenly, a shift occurs in Joseph's heart. He cries out, Gishuna, come close to me. He continues, Al tiatzvu ve'al yichar beinechem. Don't be troubled or chagrined. In that instant, Joseph turns an opportunity for revenge into an occasion for reconciliation. He realizes that no further harm will remove the pain in his heart. He realizes that the past will remain unchanged, but he can make something constructive of his future. He seeks the alternatives to hurting others. Perhaps Joseph's reluctance seems like a sign of weakness. However, by withholding his anger, he preserves the sacredness of human life. His restraint testifies to the strength and generosity of his character. What led to the change in Joseph's heart? According to one midrash, it was Judah's words. He cautioned against undeterred rage. The rabbis believe that when Judah requests, give your servant a hearing and do not let your anger flare up, he speaks from the wisdom of his family history. When a former pharaoh took his great-grandmother, Sarah, out of jealousy, the entire family fell to a plague. When Judah's own mother, Rachel, died, it was because of a curse that Jacob had casted upon the one who took Laban's idols, that they might not live long. The tradition draws upon the experiences of the matriarchs to offer a clear moral position. When frustration turns into further hostility, it brings grave consequences, not resolution. Even when the feeling of anger rises from a valid place, the decision to act upon it without restraint, without discipline, may cause more damage than ultimate good. Reading about Joseph's ordeal, I wonder about the role of anger in our lives. It is the emotion that responds to injustice, that says, hey, cut it out, that's not right. Suppressing the feeling leads to personal anguish. However, much differs between expressing feelings of being hurt, wronged, or slighted, and acting upon them in a way that displaces our pain onto others. Joseph faces the dilemma about how to deal with his grief. He thinks that plotting against his brothers will address the frustration, but when he sees them experiencing the impact of his scheme, he second-guesses his decision. How do we make room for anger while minimizing the potential for destruction? I've wrestled with this question since I received my assignment for the CBST's Daily Psalms project. The Psalms, all 150 of them, reflect the range of human emotion. Some focus on joy and thanksgiving. Others make space for lament and rage. Several poems even articulate a desire for the downfall of our enemies, including my psalm, number 36. When I remember to recite Psalm 36, I connect with a speaker who expresses immense pain and unfairness, the feeling of being left in the pit. From desperate, unjust circumstances, the poem articulates the desire for an enemy's ruin. But when it comes time for the poet to act, he pleads that God not allow him to succumb to the temptations of wickedness. He cries out, "Let not the foot of the arrogant tread on me, or the hand of the wicked drive me away." The proper recourse to the situation does not involve matching wickedness with further evil. The poem largely affirms a belief in justice, that it will prevail, and the speaker, instead of acting out in malice, decides to align with that cause, the cause of justice. One can express a desire for circumstances to shift, even one that imagines the fate of the wicked and their downfall. But when it comes time to act, our personal choices need to remain loyal to the path of righteousness. Here lies the difference between unfiltered rage and righteous indignation. When anger rises within us, how can we harness it to recommit to our moral foundation? The poet of Psalm 36 makes space for his disdain for his adversaries and the situation at hand, but he maintains a desire to remain in relationship with God's goodness. The expression of frustration at how things are may lead to a constructive vision of how things could be. Let us cry and shout to ourselves and to our support system. Let us imagine everything we want to happen to those who mistreat us. Let us find safe ways to release the pain that dwells within us. Then, let us channel that anger toward our principles rather than abandon them in pursuit of revenge or harm. In our Parsha, the Midrash, and in our Psalms, our tradition offers that we can make space for our feelings of victimhood and our response to wrongs against us. Nevertheless, as we move through the expression of such emotions, we do not cede our commitment to decency. Reverend Nancy DeClasse-Walford describes the process of reading Psalms of Revenge as one of giving over. The poems provide an opportunity to vent the emotion without inflicting pain onto others. And then they may actually compel us to pivot to a constructive place. To begin, the reader identifies with the poet's rage and longing for fairness. Then, one bravely gives ownership over final judgment to divine hands. Justice is up to God. Punishment is up to God. A psalm of revenge enables a person to release the resentment and decide that the consequences for injustice exist within a source beyond ourselves. Once the anger belongs to God, one conveys the need for justice above all else, and we affirm the connection to this cause. When somebody rejects wickedness and still upholds justice in this way, the question remains, what can I do to bolster God's goodness in the world? So, the final step of giving over involves eradicating the conditions in our world that we see that create conflict and harm in the first place, manifesting the fairness and goodness for which we yearn. Transferring the negative energy to God while expressing a devotion to better circumstances shifts our mindset from despair to repair. With the proper framing and intentionality, the Psalms that speak about the debasement of other human beings can guide a person toward affirming their moral commitments and uplifting all of humanity. Right now, we live in times full of angst. The fear, frustration, and grief of our moment sends us into the pit. As we climb out, I take inspiration from Joseph and the Psalms. The pains of conflict, oppression, and trauma give rise to reasonable anger. I maintain that a true testament of strength will come in the ability to show restraint and utilize frustration toward envisioning and creating the conditions of a more whole world. I cannot control others' justification for aggression, but I will continue to endorse harm reduction and implement incremental steps toward justice and peace. Source of life and source of compassion, give us the strength of Joseph to control reactivity and aggressive responses to anger. Do not let the hand of the wicked or the foot of the arrogant to carry us away from you. As we remember our time in the pit, give us the will to envision an alternative to violence and revenge. Grant us the strength to say, "Come close to me. Don't be troubled or chagrined." Divine spark, inspire us to channel rage, to reveal a world where righteousness flourishes and all may live and thrive. Shabbat Shalom.